So this is the Personnel Committee of the Jefferson Madison Regional Library Board of Trustees. I call this virtual real-time meeting to order, operating under the resolution adopting procedures for public meetings under Nelson County's ordinance to ensure the continuity of government during the COVID-19 disaster and the governor's amendment to the budget bill adopted by the Jefferson Madison Regional Library Board on May 18th, 2020. All right, sorry about that. Sorry that took so long. So the first thing that we just need to do is review the staff request that came in for the upcoming fiscal year. And I think there's only one. And David, can you just tell us about that?
Sure, yeah. There's more than one, but some of them are a bit of a holdover from last year. So the full board earlier this week discussed briefly the 5-year plan objectives that would have an impact on next year's personnel budget for fiscal year 22. There were no objectives in the 5-year plan that had a cost to them immediately in fiscal year 22, although there were some that were held over from last year that didn't happen either because of the normal budget process or because of COVID. So we should discuss those as well as the new additions that we got. And so for the new additions, we got a request for 2 more substitute positions at Northside, which Carla was a late addition there.
Okay.
Northside has only 1 substitute for circulation and 1 substitute for the information desk, and it has proven a challenge to arrange coverage for absences and vacations in order to ensure excellent service. And then the other one is one that I'm going to recommend this committee punts to the staff compensation committee. It is the request from Gordon Avenue to convert a 28-hour-a-week shelver position into a 28-hour-per-week branch support position. More support for circulation services is needed to provide excellent customer service and to allow other staff appropriate breaks without sacrificing customer service levels. A particular benefit, this will allow better coverage of the circulation desk on nights and weekends. Looking for decreased wait time for patrons using circulation services, reduce stress on current circulation branch and support staff. So that's not a new position per se for this group. It's an adjustment of a position that's a shelving position that's currently being asked to perform duties above and beyond the shelving position. So it's more of an adjustment than a new request.
And this person has been doing that. Is that right? Yeah, yeah. Do you have just the cost of the substitutes, the 2 more substitutes, or it's really substitute hours? Is that right?
Yes, substitute hours.
Okay.
But this leads to the requests from last year that weren't funded. So there were 2 major groupings there. One was for a 40-hour IT position, which IT is requesting again, and that is in the technology plan, in the 5-year plan, to add another 40-hour position. And the other is for a slew of positions in order to expand hours at Northside, which of course didn't happen. It was approved by Albemarle County last year pre-COVID, but then got pulled when they had to readjust their budget. So it's my recommendation to this group that we put a pin in the Northside expansion, the hours there. As I was mentioning, Carla and I chatted the other day a little bit. Without being open right now, it's difficult to go back and say, we need these more hours, and we're expecting a pretty lean, and again, this is not the budget committee, so it's not our place here to make decisions based on budget, but when I reminded managers that it was time to make personnel requests, I gave them a very doom and gloom version of what next year's budget might look like from all 5 jurisdictions, and because of that, we didn't get that many requests. Most managers, I think, we're happy to try and provide the current level of service. So I think, Margaret, do you want to speak to those sub hours at all? I know they were part of the package that was going to lead to more hours, but if we're not seeking more hours, I'm not sure that we would be able to justify asking for it.
Right. Now, I think the sub positions are just because they're subs. A sub has the ability to say, no, I can't work, or I'm going on vacation, or whatever And so then we're kind of in a lurch when we don't have. So an additional sub in each of those areas would be helpful, and it only costs if we use them. So I think that would be helpful.
And I do have some news, Carla, about the IT position as well. We had a vacancy in the computer lab, the Mont Ave computer lab at the Central Library. It was basically the second in command there. I can't remember what the title was off the top of my head. Krista can chime in with that if she knows it. But it was the person that was largely in charge of running the server for the free web hosting that JMRL does, which has seen a decline in usage over time. Still has a pretty consistent and steady client base, but nowhere near where it was when that service was first offered decades ago. So the internal conversations about that from the staff have been to split that job and send 20 hours of it towards IT and leave 20 hours of it to manage the server and help in the computer lab as well. So the plan internally has already been to shift some resources, assuming that a new 40-hour IT position is probably not likely for next year for budgetary reasons.
And so the only thing you mentioned to me is that Mont Ave is only city and county funded.
Correct.
So then the IT person who is essentially to help, like in the field, to help troubleshoot and actual facilities and computers, is that right?
That's correct. And
Yes.
computers mostly.
Yeah, so they would have to work within the city county.
Yeah, which is 5
Right.
of the 8 branches.
Yes,
So there's plenty to do. I mean, we could have a
Right.
full-time IT person at Northside probably, and that would still not be enough to cover the little things that pop up.
Okay. So I guess I'd like to look at kind of each of these positions individually, just really quickly.
Sure.
So let's go back to the 2 substitutes at Northside. So basically, there's the feeling that this is needed now, even with the current hours. What does 2 substitutes look like? It just means that those, like, how many hours is that? Do you know, or?
The total hours that we're asking for, that
Uh-huh.
Nick was asking for, is not in the documentation that was provided. I'd have to check on last year's, I think. Do you remember, Margaret, what it was from last year?
I don't remember, and we don't need subs right now. We're not using sub right now, but presumably sometime in the next fiscal year we'll open to the public.
Yeah.
And we'll be back to where people would be taking vacation and we need to staff a desk. And that's when we really need the reference subs.
Okay.
I have feelings about substitute positions that I might as well just share with this personnel committee. It seems like an appropriate place. I have some concerns about these positions because they don't get evaluated on the same schedule as the rest of JMRL. They're not eligible for the same benefits that other staff get. They don't necessarily get, we're trying to bring them in for the onboarding process, and we're now inviting them for in-service day or whatnot. But in the past, it truly has been a substitute where somebody comes in who's had minimal, there's training, of course. Like if Margaret has a substitute who works for her, she trains them on how to do their job. There's no question about that. But they might not get, in the past, they weren't necessarily on all internal communications. If there was policy change or procedural change, they might not necessarily get it communicated down because they don't necessarily work a set schedule. I have a fear that we've become overly reliant on these positions in some places, and I would much rather have somebody who is a salaried, benefited position there, and then have a little bit more flexibility in how we use some staff rather than substitute positions in a whole. But I understand the need, you know, when somebody's sick or when there is a planned vacations or there's a conference or something like that, then there are definite holes to be plugged. What I don't want to see is kind of continual usage of scheduled substitutes, because at that point you really have an employee and we should be treating them like an employee. That's just my rant on the subject.
At Northside, do support people shelve books?
I have a shelver sub, yes.
You have a shelver sub.
But So I trained her when she came on board as a sub, and then I use her once a week generally just to keep her skills, because shelving is really something that you have to keep your skills up at.
Mhm. So you're saying these subs would be for multiple positions, is that right? I was assuming they were for shelving and maybe.
Particular request here, I think, is for one to work at the circulation desk and one to work at the reference desk.
Right.
Those
And the
particular-
reference desk is all three, is the young adult desk, the reference desk, and children's.
And that's a professional level.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. So I'm happy to hear from other folks. My personal feeling is that, just as David said, we're looking at next fiscal year, and while I would love to expand the hours at Northside, I just don't see it happening in the next fiscal year based on the fact that we're not even, open this fiscal year yet, and hopefully we will. I guess I'm just a little worried about, filling positions when we're not at full speed.
Carla, I did look up, it's 300 hours for the
Okay.
year for each of those was the request.
Oh, okay, 300 hours times 2. Okay. Does anyone else have an opinion about that?
I do. I think that we need to keep the substitutes because even though we may not be at full capacity, people get sick, people go on vacations, even with this. My concern about having them know the things that everybody knows, maybe you need to do, I had a wonderful orientation. Maybe they need to have an orientation period. And then the other idea that came to mind is, I know we've had some people to retire from JMRL, and would it be to our advantage to maybe ask them to come aboard on the substitute list and maybe pay them just a little bit more than we would pay the regular substitutes? Because I'm sure some of them might miss being at work.
We have done that in the past. We have some current substitutes that are retired employees, just one right now, but in the past we have definitely done that. And I'm not advocating, Kathy, that we get rid of the current substitutes that we have. I'm just questioning whether or not we should be looking to add more instead of looking to add salaried employees. I think I would rather be able to hire somebody with a benefits package and an incentive to stay that's going to get all the benefits that everyone else did. Especially in a little bit, we're going to talk about what the new state minimum wage is going to do and it's going to mean for us over the next few years. And maybe my thinking will make a little more sense after we talk about that.
Did we get any of the money that came from the coronavirus?
No, we weren't eligible.
Okay.
Did you see in the paper about the bonuses that went out to city staff? Yeah, so did I in the paper.
Did you all get any of that?
No, we did not. We don't even have access to the CARES funding for we have spent thousands and thousands of dollars on personal protective equipment and we don't have access to that. So we're bit by bit working with the jurisdictions to get them to try and pay for some of those things, but not to the scale that Charlottesville was able to do with paying those bonuses.
Okay. That's sad.
It is sad.
So Carla, the other position that was in last year's budget that didn't make because the coronavirus hit was the new 40-hour position at Nelson County.
Right.
Which is definitely a need and would be funded entirely by Nelson County. So I'm hoping that the Personnel Committee will recommend that one to make it into the budget. Nelson County is expecting it. They've seen it. This will be the 3rd year in a row that it's been in their budget request. I have no idea what what they're going to be able to do for next year, but with the new building open, they already needed a new staff person, an extra staff person, and they're going to need it more than ever.
Yeah, and I hope everybody agrees that that should just be on our recommendation list because there is such a need. They've expanded the space. They are open during COVID. And yeah, like you said, they needed a person, a year ago, basically, to help with the move, but, to help with moving all the supplies and everything. So yeah, I think we should definitely recommend that. Could we go back to the IT position as
Sure.
well?
Mhm.
And just if you could explain a little bit how that would work, if we could fund a 40-hour position, and so if we could fund a 40-hour position, would 20 of it come from the Mont Ave funding, 20 hours of it?
So we're with or without this position that's being discussed here, there's going to be a new 20 hours of a person is going to be in IT. So if we knew this position were to be funded, we could ask for only half, for 20 hours maybe from the jurisdictions. And then when we hired somebody, they would be split. We would only hire a 20-hour person for Mon Ave and a full-time 40-hour person for IT. But that hiring is gonna happen well before this budget is passed and adopted. So, there had been no discussion about hiring two 20-hour people for the lab and for IT because the assumption is that with a 40-hour position, we'll be able to attract a better candidate. So Carla, I think it's more likely that if we were to seek funding for the 40-hour position, it would be in addition to those 20 hours. They could definitely use 60 hours worth of staffing.
Okay. And we wouldn't, you wouldn't consider, you'll be hiring for the 20-hour person now.
It's a 40-hour person split between two departments. It's one person.
Okay. Okay.
And we're holding off on that a bit because the computer lab's not open. There's not a pressing need right now for some of those services. But I expect to fill that job by the end of this calendar year.
Sure. Okay. I guess I wasn't understanding. So it is a full position, and you're just borrowing the 20 hours from this previous position.
Yeah.
And then there's an additional 40-hour position.
Yeah, that was a request held over from last year. And Josh provided excellent documentation on the need for that. And the personnel committee, the budget committee, and the full board fully supported it last year.
Yeah, I know.
It did not make the budget through Albemarle County before COVID hit. So they were reluctant to fund that position even before they got a look at their new reality, their new budget reality.
Okay.
But again, our budget committee can talk about that. If this group decides that that's a need, then we'll push forward and let the budget committee deal with the dollars.
All right. Do you want to talk about the minimum wage?
Yeah. I think it'll help us put the whole thing in a picture. So I'll let you know that my goals for today, the two big things that I want to see this committee approve are a recommendation for that Nelson County position, because that's going to be a dire need, and a recommendation for a cost of living increase for all staff, which we did not get this year. So there were no staff increases this year, except for the folks that were in the third year of the compression adjustment. Ideally, we would build a budget now using 2% cost of living or something like that. It will be a tough sled to get that next year, I think even, but I think we should fight for it. So I would hope that this committee would discuss those things and to consider making a recommendation to the full board along with the other things that we want to discuss. But let me go through what the minimum wage changes are going to be. So this is law that was passed by the state this year. And it includes 3 bumps to minimum wage between now and January 1st of 2023. And then some language saying that they hope that future legislative sessions, we'll pick it up for 2 more years. So the first bump is May 1st of next year. That's during our current budget, and it's to $9.50 an hour. And currently JMRL has no one making under that amount, so there's no adjustment required. The next bump is to $11 an hour, which is on January 1st, 2022. So that is exactly halfway through the budget that we're going to be working on right now. That will affect 9 employees that JMRL has that are under $11 currently. The current minimum at JMRL is $10.40. That's the very bottom. That's the bottom of band 1 and stage 1 of our pay scale. So we're legally obligated to raise those to $11 by January 1st of 2022, which is in this budget that we're talking about now. That's not a huge monetary expense. It's all shelvers, basically, and substitute shelvers.
How many employees did you say it was altogether?
9.
9. Thank you.
Only one of those is full-time, I believe. So it's mostly part-time and substitute shelvers. The next year is going to be a jump up to $12 on January 1st, 2023. So that will be in the subsequent budget. At that point, there are 22 employees currently making between $11 and $12 at JMRL. So we'll need to address that in the following year. That would be a total then of 31. So the 9 between 10 and 11, and then the 22 between 11 and 12. So the staff compensation committee is going to have to meet to discuss this. I have a preliminary proposal for them that I'd like them to consider. Do you mind if I screen share and show something here?
Yeah, great.
Let me bring it up first. I didn't. And this is on the intranet, so available for staff and trustees. This is just the current pay scale, which last went up this year with a 1% increase. Can you all see my screen?
Not yet.
How about now? I think I just got booted.
It says you're the host,
Okay, let's try that again.
but it says you're the host now. I thought you were the host anyway.
I was.
There you go. We can see it now.
Okay, can everyone see?
Yes.
Mhm.
It might be tiny there.
Put the glasses on.
So this is the current pay scale, and the way that it works is that we have 3 bands and different stages in between each one in which our employees are grouped. So the one that we're talking about right now is band 1, stage 1, and there are 3 types of jobs in there. There's the courier position, and having done that a little bit this summer, I definitely believe that we need to compensate higher for that job. The custodian position, of which we have 2 in the system, and then the aforementioned shelver positions. The next group up there are a large chunk of our employees, the support stage, so branch support and circulation support, lab folks and maintenance folks. So a lot of times when you come in and you're checking out a book and interacting with a staff member, this is the band and the stage that they fall in on. And you can see, or maybe you can see, that the starting salary there is $11.64. So this whole group is going to have to move up to $12 by January 2023. The next 2 jumps up if the General Assembly agrees to them. So the $12 by 2023 is the last legal limit, but they're suggesting $13.50 the following year and $15 the year after that, because the goal all along was to get to $15 an hour. So if it holds, we'll need to be at $15 an hour for every position by January 1st, 2026. Right now, the legal obligation is $12 by January 1st, 2023. As I mentioned, there are about 30 people that are falling under that $12 range that we're going to have to deal with the next few years. What I would like the compensation committee to consider is merging these 2 stages, stage 1 and stage 2, and making a change to the shelver positions that we have to make them support level positions, meaning that they would They would get the same training in other circulation type activities that support staff get and would be available to use to check books out, to answer the phone, things like that. It's a little bit of a branch by branch thing right now. If you are a shelver at Gordon Avenue, as we were discussing that position, then you are working circulation some for lunchtime on the weekend when somebody's out to answer the phone, to help patrons and things like that. If you're in the reference department at the central library and you're a shelver, then your job is really to take this cart of books and put them out. And of course, you're helping people as you see them out there, but your primary responsibility is at all times to get the books on the shelf. Not every location or department has that. Most of our exterior jurisdictions do not have shelver positions. The staff, the support staff does that as well. So it's really just Crozet, Gordon, Central, and Northside that have dedicated shelver positions. So the compensation committee is going to meet to talk about changing that job a bit, to give it more responsibility to go along with the added pay that's going to come because we're going to be required to do that by law, which is great. It's a good thing, and I'm excited that we're working on this. Okay, so that to me helps to kind of clarify a little of this conversation, both about Gordon's request for that position. It seems like a preemptive move to have the compensation committee look at doing that now, and then also the discussion about adding more substitutes down the road. Ideally, I would think 5 years from now, I'd like to be at a point where, to pick on Margaret specifically, she's got shelver staff working for her that would be available and trained to substitute at other positions within the library, but would be salaried staff, so that they wouldn't, they would get the benefit of all the training and the communication that salaried staff get. We're not there yet, and there's a lot of work to do. This is just the first. This is the hatch straight from my brain scheme that hasn't gone through any levels of staff discussion or consideration yet, and is certainly not fully ready for board or personnel committee, movement on, but that's what we're looking at.
So you would want this to be solved going into by the time we reach July.
Ideally, if not, as we build the budget, as the budget committee starts looking at this, what we will probably do is simply take those 9 employees that I mentioned and move them up to $11 an hour for that budget for next year. So we wouldn't.
I see.
That
Okay.
would happen before we kind of caught up with our structure here on what that would mean for them.
Okay.
And if there's a real budgetary problem there, then we could budget it for half the year, so it would start in January. But since these folks are already benefited, the non-substitute ones, there aren't tremendous new additional costs there. I think the napkin math I did said it was about $10,000 total for those 9 positions to get up to $11 an hour. So if we did half the year, it would be less than that. And also, none of them are shared regional costs, and none of them are outside Charlottesville and Albemarle for the first year. That helps because it means we don't have to go to our smaller jurisdictions, although they're going to be dealing with this on their own staff. They're going to have to be figuring out ways to meet these obligations for their own staff. So they're going to understand for sure. But for that first year, it won't be a drain on the outlying regions. It will be Charlottesville and Albemarle, where they both have already made pushes to raise wages for their staff. Charlottesville is already at $15 an hour. The county was working on that plan. It got a little bit COVID derailed.
Well, it sounds like a great idea. And so going back to that, so basically everybody in 1 and 2 would all be in like a stage 1. Is that right? Okay.
They would be the support level.
The support level.
Instead of the there's no name on it there, but band 2 is a support level. Band 3 is specialist. Band 4 supervisor there for that first, stage. Those all should have been stages for that first band. This whole system, and maybe Krista can speak on it, but this whole system is something that was adapted when the city of Charlottesville moved to a new compensation scale in like 2004, maybe?
It's been a while.
Yes. So it is already
Dated.
up to 15 years out of date. And, this group, the Personnel Committee worked very hard over the years to look at salaries themselves, but didn't necessarily look at those job titles and job descriptions in the same way. But that's long overdue for a huge project to overhaul all of our compensation competencies and things like that.
And we've been doing it ourselves. When it was initially put in place, there was a consultant that came and did all the work. And we've just been trying to keep it updated and somewhat current and consistent. So we've also asked the city for some guidance, and they have a new HR director. So maybe that will be coming down the road. But since they are our personnel and HR, liaison or agent, so we'll see. But yeah, it's getting out of date.
It's diverged quite a bit from the cities too, as they've made changes and we haven't communicated back and forth about them at all times. We've made slight changes, and over 15 years, that starts to look like two totally different things. So this would be kind of a Band-Aid. Whatever we do in the next year or two is going to be a little bit of a Band-Aid until we get to the point where we can redesign the whole thing. But this does, in my mind, add a little bit of importance to that Gordon Avenue change that Camille requested. And so ideally, I think that this committee would just recommend that the compensation committee work on that and make it happen. And then the North Side substitute positions. For one, we did get initially the extra hours added to last year's budget before COVID. But then we also got some feedback from the Board of Supervisors, or from a particular member of the Board of Supervisors, that the preference really would be for Sunday hours, not for the hours that JMRL had been discussing. So I think we kind of need to go look at that with fresh eyes. I don't think next year is going to be the year to add new hours at Northside, unfortunately, just because of the economic realities we're all facing. But I think that should include looking at the positions that we asked for last year and see if it could be tweaked a little bit for different needs.
David, one quick question. To the point that Kathy brought up earlier about those sub positions at Northside, what's your sense of kind of depth of bench among staff currently?
You mean like pandemic depth of bench? Basically?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I think actually, I'm knocking on wood, especially at Northside, we're in really good shape right now. We've got a few folks that have special circumstances that require various accommodations, but by right now, everybody is back working their full hours at Northside, and they just this week expanded some curbside hours. And I believe the move is to get everybody back to their full regular schedule as well. Margaret, is that correct? I heard that this morning. Yeah. So that would mean fully stocked, everyone on board, unless something happens, Thomas, which is, all of our protocols are in place. We fully expect that if there is a case of COVID, we'll be able to handle it, but it certainly would test that.
Okay, thank you.
And all JMRL staff are working full hours as of now. They are not necessarily working their regular scheduled hours. So if I worked, 9 to 5 Monday through Thursday and then 9 to 5 Saturday, I might be working some crazy combination of that, or working Sundays to avoid people, or only working the morning and working the night. But they're all working their full hours so that we can honestly tell our jurisdictions every dollar that you're paying into personnel is going to a dollar of, an hour of service, or, they're being paid full for, and they're working full.
Wonderful. Thank you.
So I think what we just need to do now is just, make our suggestions that would then go to the budget committee. And so I'd just like to hear from everybody. Obviously, the Nelson County position is important, and I think I am going to recommend the 40-hour IT person in addition to filling the vacancy for Mont Ave.
I'm kind of leaning that way too, Carla. I just feel like that's a very, very important piece of what we do, and we shouldn't let that get too far ahead of us. And 2 fiscal years feels like a little too far ahead.
Mm-hmm. And then obviously we have to cover the legal base of the 9 employees, just bringing them up to $11 an hour. But I would like to be involved in however we can be involved in helping to combine basically those job descriptions or the tiers of like job descriptions, so that we're prepared for the next fiscal year when it starts jumping $1 more an hour and then $1.50 an hour, because it's going to create another compression issue.
Yes, absolutely.
I
mean, even these 9 is going to create they're going to be ripples.
Yeah, it's a small compression. Yeah, but I was looking at kind of like what the next jump is, and I thought it was like 1140. Is that right? Does it go
in our current pay scale?
Yeah, does it go 1040 and then 1140? Is that right?
Let's see.
And I don't even know if anybody falls into that category or not.
So we're really looking at the minimum here, the first column.
Right.
So these are the range that people are in. So we do have a lot of people that are in this band 1, stage 1, but are not under $11, and some that are not under $12 because they've been here for years,
Right.
So this is 1164 is the next.
Right. And then I'm just kind of looking at what is the next scale? Just to see where people who have been here for a while, where they might fall, yeah.
And that's right. So the problems that we're going to have are compression moving forward, and the fact that both of these, when we group them, are going to start to bump up into this level.
Yes.
The specialist level, which is one that has a lot more responsibility. The 2 big things are more responsibility in the absence of a manager, and the addition of programming. This is our programming level where folks are actively offering programming, and the 2 prior to that are not. So we just got done with a 3-year salary compression, which was very successful. It really helped get us on track, but the tool that Zach built for us allows us to look at that annually, and we can look and see at any given snapshot of time, what the compression effects are going to be, but we need to have a set pay scale first before doing that. And we can throw numbers at it to figure out what it would mean. But yeah, likely we will spend the next few years bootstrapping up to the minimum wages, and then we'll spend the next few years after that smoothing out the compression.
Yeah. And so most of your employees probably fall into stage 2 or stage 3, right? That's the bulk of your.
This is the bulk of employees between those 2. The next bands and stage are like the manager level, basically. So there are less employees, but not necessarily less dollars put into it, because they're branch managers and professional librarians that cost more to the system than these band 1 positions.
So in terms of the other 2 requests, I guess I'm just struggling with the substitute hours at Northside, because basically what you're saying is the Gordon Avenue position will write itself. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe it would be converting.
Yeah.
Right. It would be upgrading a position.
It'll be upgrading a position.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so I'm just struggling with the North Side, and I'm happy to hear other thoughts about that.
I would say that with those were positions that we have needed for a long time. We have a lot of service desks to staff, and we'll try to go on vacation right now. We often have to end up switching with each other so that somebody can go on vacation, which can get complicated, particularly if 2 people would like to go on vacation during the same time period. So those are positions that we have needed. And in this COVID time, we don't need the one position. The CERC person has been, the CERC sub has been working when regular CERC staff has been on vacation. They have called that person in. We just haven't needed to reference one because we don't have any service desks.
Sure. And I guess like, I don't want to say that I don't think there's a need for them. I'm just trying to understand, like the 300 hours, 2 people, and it not being, David's concern about it kind of filling a gap, but not really increasing the staff to what it needs to be.
I think another option that I would like us to consider as a system down the road, Carla, is to not, the city requires us that we add a position for every substitute that we have, which was not always the case. I like to think of it more as like, here's a pool of money that's available.
Yes.
And
okay.
I would like to be able to add positions to the existing pool, so it's not necessary that we could meet the scenario that Margaret's talking about, where somebody is out that day, but substitute 1 and substitute 2 couldn't be there. We could then go to substitute 3, but that means truly substitute, not somebody scheduled, who works every week. It's more like what Kathy was discussing with somebody who is retired and can come in. And it's hard to find people that meets their life because it's not a steady paycheck. Sure. I think you could be a school sub and work most every day because somebody's always out. We just don't have that many employees. But that to me is the better long-term solution, is we could add hours, but not necessarily increase the dollar amount, just to give them more flexibility for we need somebody this time or that time.
And that makes more sense to me. Like that I get. It's just this idea like that we're saying 2 people. That's what it sounds like to me, that we're saying 2 people, 2 substitutes who together would be working 600 hours at this level. And, but if you say, no, we need this pool of money, and, but what you're saying is we don't have the pool of staff to pull from then.
One thing that I hear your conversation, and I agree with what you're saying. We need to probably say, because I've heard people say the substitutes come in when somebody wants to take a vacation. We need to say when someone is going to be out long-term for illness and vacation, so that, because a lot of times people hear, well, you're going on vacation, you're gone. It really doesn't make a difference. They can hang in on your side, and we know that's not true. So you want to put that sickness in there too, unless there is something I don't know. But I think it's very important that we include illness.
That's a good point. And I think in the past we have run into issues at some smaller libraries where funding hasn't been available for things like this, and they've had to close. I mean, this is many, many years ago, but I remember a jurisdiction having to close for a week because staff wasn't going to be able to use their leave, they sick or vacation, because there was no one to cover. If they weren't there, then the building couldn't be open, and they had to close the library for a week. So we're nowhere near, that discussion at this point.
Well, excuse me for cutting you off, but we have to think about, we're in a pandemic. Mental health issues also will come up. And so, we're in a new day, and I hope that one day we'll look back and say it made us tougher, but you do need to have a backup. And that's just my 2 cents.
I have one question. Are these 600 hours, was that baked into the previous slew of positions that we had talked about expanding service at Northside?
I believe they were. Both of them were, along with, it's been over a year. So, well, no, it hasn't been over a year. It feels like over a year. It was just this past spring. But I believe that these 2 substitute positions plus 2 part-time employees were part of the whole package that we were seeking from Northside, from Albemarle. Well, I should say 80% from Albemarle, 20% from Charlottesville. and that they, Albemarle fully supported that. They are interested in adding hours to Northside when funds allow for it, or they were this spring at least.
But basically, we're asking for the money whether we open the extra hours or not.
Yeah, we're not seeking extra hours for next year at this point.
But I think that maybe that's a compelling case to say this is something we were planning to do anyway to meet your desire to expand hours. We'll have need for these people down the road, and I think the need for them now is justifiable and understandable given the circumstances that everyone's in. So, I mean, I'd be in favor of trying to pursue it. And again, all of this, including, the 40-hour IT position, we'll see how far it goes when it gets through the whole process. But, for where we are today, I think the need is justifiable.
Yeah, I'm not sure, Thomas, if I 100% agree with that, just because I know you're aware, being in a municipality yourself of the very real problems that are going to come up next year and the following year during budget season. So I would like to see JMRL acknowledge that when we're talking to our jurisdictions and show good faith in an attempt to try and provide great service, but not to necessarily add on to that service until we have a better picture of what the economy is going to look like, not just next year, but in the next few years. That's my personal opinion, but I think it's good for the board to discuss this and to weigh in on that.
And I think we can certainly prioritize, that, prioritize these requests. So like the Nelson County request, is a priority. The IT position is a priority. And the $11 an hour is a requirement, So, and then, if we as a board feel that the 2% raise is a priority, it means something is we'll probably have to give.
Yeah.
That's all. I mean, I don't want to dismiss any of these requests, right? I think they're all valid, but I want us to be able to be reasonable and be willing to give and take.
Would this committee be willing to recommend the cost of living increase, the 2% cost of living increase as the top priority you're recommending? Would you be willing to say that? Taking the $11 out of it, Carla, because that's required. We have
It's required.
That's getting in the budget no matter what, because that's the law.
I think my top two are the 2% and the Nelson position. Knowing that Nelson is, it's all on Nelson.
Yeah, and luckily those things aren't likely in direct competition because of what you just said. Like Nelson County is going to have the ultimate yay or nay. It's ultimately every dollar of that is coming from Nelson County.
But they've received the request twice before, I think.
And we have discussed it. Marcy and I have discussed it with their board of supervisors. We the last time we talked about it, their budget sessions got canceled this spring before they got moved to a non-public setting before we had a chance to discuss it. But the previous year, in talking with them about it, they were supportive of it, said, we recognize there's going to be the need, but let's wait until the building is done. Because at that point, construction was just starting.
Yeah, but it's done and they're open. Yeah. Yeah. So the 2%, the 2% cost of living raise is a priority for me. Kathy, how do you feel about it?
I'm okay with the 2%, but do we know how much the city's going to ask for?
For their employees?
Yeah, I mean, have you had any I know it's been tough to have a conversation.
Yeah. They're not there yet. They likely won't be. Since we have to be so far ahead of their own budgeting, we need to present our budget to them before they start working on their budget, basically. I have reached out to the budget office there, Kathy, but the two things that I've asked them about are the two numbers that we need in order to put our budget together. It's the retirement costs and the medical insurance costs. So they'll be providing that to us soon. We likely won't hear about their staff compensation for a while. I know that both Charlottesville and Albemarle did not give any cost of living raises last year, but they got that bonus that you mentioned. And that
Well,
it wasn't for everybody though.
yeah. Well, my feeling is 2% if that's all we can do. If we can find more, a little bit more. Nelson, obviously, but I also think that we need to put the IT person on the list also.
Yep.
And maybe, I know when I went with you to one of the budget hearings, we could always have in a back pocket if they have a surplus or if someone donates or the last thing would be for the substitute.
So what Kathy said, the order was 2% cost of living, the Nelson position, the IT position, and the Northside substitutes in that order.
Yeah.
We have this is a unique situation, Carla, in which I think for the first time, Thomas is going to be, he's the chair of the budget committee as well.
All
So
right.
he gets a preview of what the budget committee will be discussing.
So we know that we're going to get everything we want, right?
That's why I was trying to temper the optimism.
He's like adding things up.
I am very, very much okay with including, as Kathy mentioned, those two subs on the list. And you know, if we order them as you had it there, I'd be okay with that too. But I think that including that, since it is something that's been, you know, a piece of something that Albemarle's been asking for, and I think it's a piece that we can justify putting in place now. I'd like to see us try to include that and see what we can do. I see that as being similar enough to what we're asking for with Nelson County, that I think it should be included there.
You're talking about the substitute positions?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. And I feel when you talk about it, you want to indicate that they sub for illness and they sub for vacation. You know, you want to spread it out. And I think, again, this situation has put everybody on the fence with some kind of problem. And I almost can guarantee you that we're going to utilize them probably more than we've ever done it before because of the conditions of our world right now.
And these are not tremendous costs, but I will say,
I know that.
I will say that the circulation substitute position is one that will need to go up. You know, it would start at 1164 there as band 1 stage 2. So it would also need to be raised by January of 2023. So the costs for that, you know, will continue to escalate. It would need to be up to $15 presumably by 2 years after that. So, you know, that's another thing to think about as we're adding new positions, is that the dollar amount now is going to have to scale up along with the rest of the staff dollar amounts.
And I think just also looking forward, if the staff are going to be looking at basically the whole pay scale, if we could think about calling these subs maybe something other than subs, you know, that it would be, they would just be called, you know, circulation support, but the funding would be pulled from a temp pool or like a sub pool. Does that make sense?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, if they're in the same band and stage, and you know, if we're going to call them the same thing as these other jobs, then that means they would need to get evaluations, which I'm okay with that. I really do think that, and I know we have really excellent supervisors, and I know like Margaret supervises substitutes, and she, you know, talks to them frequently and make sure that they're aware of goings on and new things that are happening. And like, for example, the COVID protocols that are happening right now, you know, they're all hearing those things, but we would need to make sure that it's standardized. I don't have a solution for how to handle JMRL's substitute pool at this point. I think in an ideal world, we would have more cross training, and we would have folks that are available to go So it wouldn't be necessarily just a pool that Albemarle's paying into here where somebody's only available for Nelson. It would be, I mean, for Northside, it would be Central could call them, Nelson could call them. We would have a pool that would be a little bit more more flexible in where they could go. And this is just how it's built up over 20 years. But I think we're going to have some opportunities to revisit that in the next few years.
And then maybe the load would be carried, you know, just based on your locality's percentage or whatever.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. And then I realize not every substitute wants to be working 5 days a week, but maybe there are folks who want to be working 4 days a week and they don't care so much about where those 4 days are. I don't know. But if they had a chance to build their skills, then that might be of interest.
And it is in the 5-year plan to come up with a cross-training program for JMRL that our training committee was starting work on. They've been otherwise occupied recently, but you know, I would also like to see more availability for just regular staff at the same band and stage. So if we have one of these former shelvers that are now support shelvers, and there's a need that arises at Northside because somebody is sick or whatnot, then we could transfer somebody from another branch or department over. So I just in general would like us to try to build more flexibility into this than we have had in the past as a regional system, because that should be an advantage, right? We're a regional library system. We should be able to take advantage of that.
Definitely.
So what I'm hearing is that you all want to present to the budget committee effectively a budget that includes all of these requests, and that we would prioritize the 2% raise and the Nelson position. And I didn't really hear a ranking between the next two, the IT and the substitute hours. I'll tell you that my guess, Thomas, when the budget committee starts working on it, the one that's more likely to go through would be the substitute hours because of the cost.
Because of the cost.
Yeah, just straight up.
I think we had them ranked in the opposite order, though. IT position first and the subs at Northside was sort of how we settled.
I think also that we have to be willing to answer to Albemarle County if they say, hey, well, weren't these positions part of expanding the hours? Are you planning to expand the hours? And then we could say, well, okay, if we expand the hours, then these would be the hours, right? They wouldn't be Sunday hours, right? Because the Sunday hours are more costly. Is that right?
And these substitute positions are not nearly enough to.
Not nearly enough.
Hours.
Okay.
But
Okay.
I agree with your concept there, is that if we present this to the staff and the elected officials at Albemarle County and they say, well, you know, what we really want is Sunday hours, then we need to be flexible and turn around and revamp last year's proposal.
Right. This is what it costs then. Yep. Yeah. That's good.
So can we, is there a consensus that we can have the staff compensation committee work on that Gordon Avenue position?
Yes.
Any problem with that? Okay.
No problem with that. Mm-mm.
Okay.
That's fine by me.
And then what we will do is the staff will incorporate those 4 things into the budget we're working on now. Again, this is very preliminary because we won't know. The biggest thing every year is the medical increase, and we frequently don't know for sure until January or February what that's going to be. We should know the retirement rate, which only affects the employees that are on the pension plan, basically, which JMRL doesn't offer anymore. So it's only employees that have been working since whatever that cutoff date was, so 2008 or 9, I think. But it ends up being quite a bit of money because for most employees, our very generous retirement package is 8% of your salary goes into basically a 401. For the folks that were on the pension plan, JMRL pays the entirety of it, except they pay in at 2%, I believe. Is it 2% or 3%? Krista?
I'm not sure. I know they started making us help contribute
Yeah, a few years ago. But JMRL pays in, it was like 57% of salary for each of those employees. And there's a long time employees who have been here. So that gets very expensive. If that percentage goes up, it wildly affects personnel costs, which are the majority by far of what our budget is. It's something like, it's over 75% of what the budget for JMRL is. Okay, that sounds good. Do we have anything else on the agenda, Carla?
Let me double check. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Future priorities.
And I think what I was referring to there was the fact that we're gonna need to address these upcoming statewide changes. So maybe this group could get back together just to discuss that after the staff compensation committee has had a chance to take a few cracks at it later in the year. This I see more in line with the type of projects. So most of you are probably aware, but this is Carla's last year on the library board, and she has been in charge of this committee for years. She has performed 2 massive projects, which were huge in terms of JMRL success. One was to do a salary study and to raise JMRL salary scales, and that was, I think that started about 8 years ago and ran for 3 years. And then the second was the compression plan, which
Compression. And
This
here
is
we are with the
more-
compression again.
this is more in line with those type of problems rather than just figuring out what to budget for every year.
And I actually, so my term runs through September of next year. So I can be like on this committee for a couple months, but obviously I won't be chairing it, right? But hopefully we can, we can kind of get on top of some of this and be prepared. And in the past, Albemarle County, the HR staff at Albemarle County has been really helpful in kind of thinking through the problems. And so hopefully we can rely on them to kind of just be a sounding board and talk about like what's realistic and what's not. So
And as last year, Albemarle had been planning on raising their minimum wage to $15, so they were well aware of this. We discussed it when the trustees and I met with the budget staff last year. They're well aware that this is on the horizon, and of course they are well aware of what the state law will be. So I think we'll have full support and cooperation from our jurisdictions, but we have to have our own internal systems catch up to where we need to be and make sure that we're not doing a disservice to our longtime employees and just, raise everything up. And then this is the compression problem, right? Is that you have people who've been here 10 years making the same thing that somebody who started yesterday. So we're in good shape now, but there's more work to be done.
And the other thing is that the bigger localities, when they have made these jumps, they've done it like all in one fiscal year. Like they might talk about it for 3 fiscal years, but then they just make the jump. And obviously we've never been in the position to do that where we could say, oh, you're making 1040 now. Okay, we're going to raise you up to 15 an hour. We just have never been in that position to do it. So we'll do 3 years again.
Yeah, and it will depend on what the General Assembly does too, because this is the end goal of 15 is a few years out, and they might change that over time. But the next 3 years are law right now. You got the only public comment we have, Carla, is from Mike Powers, who gave a clap emoji, which I think was in honor of your service here.
Oh, thanks. That's very sweet.
Okay, so I think I have, just to summarize, the staff will work on a budget, including the priorities, including all 4, the 2% cost of living, the Nelson County position, the IT position, and the sub hours for Northside, and present that for the budget committee to discuss and recommend. Here's the prioritized list of these 4, and then the budget committee will deal with those 4 at that point. And I'm glad I think will work out well that Thomas was able to be part of this conversation, and then will be part of that one.
And when do you want that to start?
It's in the annual schedule, Thomas, but we need to have a budget to present to the board at the November meeting. So the staff need a few weeks here to come up with something. I expect we will probably have a draft before the October meeting. So sometime right around the end of October, beginning of November.
Well, that sounds fine.
Okay.
Great. I'll reach out to you around after my
Yeah,
last
I'll
council
let you
meeting this
know.
month. Yeah.
Yeah, calendar says our budget calendar says early November for that meeting.
Okay. Sounds great.
All right. Well, thank you all for your time and for your thoughtfulness, and we'll see how it moves forward with our requests. All right.
Okay.
Anything else?
No, thank you all very much.
Yeah, I think we can adjourn.
Thanks,
Thank
Carla.
you.
Take care,
Thanks.
everyone. See you
Thank
soon.
you.
Nice to see you all.
Helps too. I read what was put on about the survey. It would help because I'm sitting here trying to run through what you're saying. So it would help as we talk about the item to say number one, number two, number three, so that we can kind of follow, because as you grade yourself, you know, I did mine about 12:30 at night, and a lot of things that I thought about came to mind, but then after I submitted it, some other things came to mind. So it would help me a great deal next time when we do review this to go back and go point by point, because then I can say, oh yeah, I should have put that, or oh no, I'm not doing that, because a whole year goes by and you do things. I can remember going to my church and introducing the Festival of the Book and some of the things that we talked about. And because I am an educator and I educated kids in the middle who did not like school, who did not like parents, who did not like authority, this is one of the reasons why I came on the board, because I have always wanted to show them that reading is important. And Lisa, I'm a lot older. Betsy Barnes was my favorite person, and my mother stopped me from reading that. but you probably don't remember that because you probably weren't born. But we need to kind of look at it and then come back together as a group, just as Thomas mentioned. A lot goes into this when you're evaluating yourself, and a lot can be left out because we don't always like to toot our own horn, and we don't always like to take responsibility for where we may have a shortcoming. So I would like to offer that suggestion.
One of the things that I thought about over the last couple of years is questioning whether a board retreat, especially because there's so many new members on the board over the last couple of years, might not be a good way for us to bring some of these issues out, discuss them in a safe environment, and really try to make the board better. If that's something that the board would be willing to consider, especially when we can get together face to face. I think that would really strengthen the bonds between trustees, help with all of the specific work that we do, but also give David a good platform from which to orient other board members as they begin coming on the board, and some of us are rotating off. Can I get some feedback? I mean, would people be willing to spend the time to do that?
I'll volunteer to go and host it in Hawaii, and you all join me virtually. I'll make sure you enjoy it. I'll have details.
Generous offer, Wendy.
The food.
Or perhaps we could go.
We talked about it before, and I think people were in agreement a lot, but now with the COVID, I guess we're gonna gives us time to plan, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll point out with the remote meetings, we really have lost, and it's just a necessity, but we've lost the opportunity for the little water cooler conversations and connections, that might happen with other meetings. And so there's definitely trustees that I just haven't interacted with very much, just because the opportunity hasn't been there. So I do think that, one motivation for the type of thing you're describing, Marcy, could just be professional development, but I think the sort of just the personal connections and just that working relationship, those opportunities have been lost. And so it'd be great if there was a way to, facilitate that somehow a little better.
Well, if you can think of a way to do that virtually.
That's the trick. Yeah.
That's the trick. But perhaps what I'll do is talk with David and see if we can outline a plan for something in the spring that we might be able to do outside, so that even if we are still under constraints in terms of meeting face to face, we can do it in a safe place, and people can begin to sort of reestablish the connections that we had as a board when we were able to meet face to face. Are there any other issues that anyone would like to raise about how the board functions? You can be as critical of me as you would like to be, but I hope that you might have some constructive comments about how we might make this board function better. It's perfect, huh?
No, but I think we need time to digest.
Okay.
And maybe we could bring the suggestions back next time and think a little bit about it, or do it through email, or with each other and with you. I feel like I just need to think about what you all just said. That is important. What Mike said, what you said.
I would appreciate it if anybody who has any feedback would contact me with that. We can talk on the phone, we can do it by email. And I will see if we can set up something that we can start looking forward to in the spring, where we can get together as board. We have budget committee, meetings and going through, working with the jurisdictions to make sure our budget comes through with as much support for the library system as we can muster. So I think the next 3 or 4 months are going to be really taken up with a lot of requests from David and from the budget committee for input and work on these budget issues. But once we get through that, hopefully we can then revisit this issue of how well the board functions and whether we can make it function any better. In that context, it would be helpful to me if each of you would send me to the JMRL email address, the trustee N email address, the way that you would prefer to be contacted if I need to get in touch with you. I've noticed that people on the board look with varying intervals at the JMRL emails, and yet I don't want to crowd all of your different communication boxes with duplicates of things that you're going to be seeing in other places. So if you could let me have a list of the ways you want to be contacted, I would really appreciate it. Thanks, and thanks for thinking through this over the next few months so that we can hopefully have some productive discussions in the spring. David, now we'll talk about the budget objectives that are beginning to come together for fiscal year 22.
Thank you, Marcy. And I'm not part of that board self-evaluation, but I will say I know how difficult this has been for all of you all with going 2 months without a board meeting and then shifting to virtually and trying to make very difficult decisions. I mean, the most important decisions you've had to make, any of you, during your tenure here. So I will say that the library staff greatly appreciates the time and energy and thought that you all put into this volunteer work, especially when it came to helping make decisions about the COVID response that JMRL has been going through. So that's my personal thanks. Okay, just a quick snapshot of where we are. We're beginning budget work right now. The timeline is that the Personnel Committee is meeting later this week to review managers' requests for changes in the operational budget. There were no surprises there. I mean, most managers, I think, have a pretty realistic view of what the budget picture is going to look like for our jurisdictions in the next few years. They will make recommendations based on that. I will be getting together with the heads of all 5 jurisdictions within the next, before October 15th, I think it's written into our regional agreement, or their representatives to talk about JMRL's budget prediction for next year and to hear about their own early indicators for their budgets. The 5-year plan has no fiscal commitment in it for next year, for fiscal year 22, except for the additional hours at Northside that were actually requested coming into fiscal year 21. So there's nothing new that we were expecting to add this year. There was a lot of work prepping for the next few years that we'll have to think about. And of course, there were cuts from the requests that were to meet 5-year plan goals this current year in the spring. So the current budget that we're operating under does not support the goals that we had in last year's budget for a 40-hour IT position, the new hours at Northside, and the Personnel Committee will discuss both of those next week to see whether or not they're viable moving forward. The administrative priority, so my priority is to secure cost of living raises for staff, which we did not get last year. So staff got no increase in pay last year and are doing more work than ever and under difficult circumstances. So ideally, this board would support those raises as their top objective. And then we're talking about maintaining current levels of service. We'll talk about Northside and the hours there, but my belief is probably that request won't come through for next year. It'll be coming up with a plan for the next few years to add those in. So I don't think that requires, Marcy, any action from the board, but it would be good to hear some consensus on or thoughts on the supporting raises for staff as the top priority that I am going to pursue administratively. Any questions?
Other than a nod, thanks, Lisa.
I'm nodding here as well.
Thanks, Thomas. Okay, I think you've got good support from the board, David. I think all of us understand how difficult this has been for staff. Not only not getting the raise for this year, but also the extra work that they've been doing.
And also, of course, the big driving factor in our personnel budget is always the cost in medical insurance and retirement that we won't get full numbers from the city of Charlottesville probably until the very end of the year. So we'll start asking them for early guesses, but that's just what they are at this point.
Right. And we'll all have to see. I guess we're going into the season when all of us are going to be looking at changes in our health insurance and that sort of thing. Thank you. The next order of business is a Friends Liaison report. Wendy is not only serving on this board, but also serving on the Friends board. Unmute, Wendy.
Sorry. David's done a great job of keeping you informed, so I think you all are pretty much aware of what's been happening and what's going on, and we're just in that maintenance mode. But they've been doing this Sunday afternoon book bag sales. We're still looking for a warehouse type storage and potentially future, which we had started before the pandemic, looking for a house for the books and future book sales perhaps. So that's ongoing. They've got some leads. So hopefully next time, or two more times we meet, I'll be able to tell you what they've actually come through with. And I also, if you're interested, I don't really know how to put the budget up here, but if you're interested in the figures, obviously this is devastating and financially for the Friends and jointly for the library, because all of the, or a lot of the programs and all are funded by the Friends. So until we get back on track with the book sales, we have been talking about other ways of raising money and fundraising, and coming up with some other ideas to spur some monetary growth from the public for the Friends, and also just keeping their name out and about and encouraging any kind of publicity and information that we could get doing, so we can get those book sales ready to go again, I hope. But if there are any questions that you have or anything that you would like to suggest, I'd be happy to take some ideas back with me, so you can email me or have some creative ideas, or can end this any sooner, or you have somebody who has a warehouse who wants to give to us, that's also good.
I might reach out to you about that, Wendy.
Oh, okay.
That sounds good. Thanks, Wendy. It's nice to feel like we're in better touch with what's going on at the Friends right now, especially the difficult circumstances that they're dealing with. Now we go to old business, since we didn't have any active committee meetings yet, although we'll have a personnel committee meeting on Thursday afternoon at 3, virtual, correct, Carla? And David, you give us a review on the COVID-19 plan and how it's going.
Sure, thank you. So it won't be too long, but I do have some pictures to show you about the first week of Tier 3 service at Greene, Louisa, and Nelson. So if you'll recall, at the last board meeting, you all authorized me to work with our jurisdictions on a limited reopening on a per jurisdiction, per branch basis. So I worked with Greene, Louisa, and Nelson, who were all supportive. They all reviewed JMRL's Tier 3 appointment only plan. We also resubmitted it to the health department for review because it had changed over the summer as we were working on different scenarios. So those 3 branches opened last Monday for service. I got to visit all 3 during the week and have been in touch with their managers. It's really a testament to the staff at all 3 locations, to the managers, Ophelia Payne, Ginny Reese, and Susan Huffman, who prepared for this. They all, we had a manager's check-in this morning. They all said how gratifying it was to be able to serve the public again and how their staff felt safe doing so. So it's going well, but I don't have a ton of data because it's only been 1 week. So just so you know, the next step moving forward will be to engage with Albemarle County to be talking about the exterior, so Scottsville and Crozet, to talk to Albemarle county about a timeline for a phased appointment only service there, kind of working in concentric circles to hopefully at some point get back into the Charlottesville urban area once we have a full picture of what this fall is going to look like. So if you don't mind, I'll share, I will share a few pictures. I promise this won't take too long, Marcy.
That's okay, David. I think a little joy in our lives is worth it.
I agree. Okay, so how do you make it go? My face is in the way of the, here we go. So steady business, no one has had to be turned away for service, which was one of the questions that the board had, whether we had to tell somebody, no, there's no time for you. They have had, each branch has reported having to make times that were not the first choice of an appointment. So somebody would ask for 10 o'clock on Tuesday and they were told, well, no, but 11 o'clock works, and they were able to do that. Let's see, let's look at some pictures. So here's green. They're entering on the side reading garden there, which is not normally an entrance to the library. The main entrance, of course, is the shared entrance to the building. And while Java is also offering programming there, we made the decision to offer service through the side garden there. So you can see the extensive level of signage that all of our locations have at this point. I'm not even going to attempt to read that sign. My eyes are not that good. But inside the building, Ginny and her staff have done a great job of marking out, you know, here's where to go to keep the flow of traffic moving in one way, to keep people from bouncing into each other. Asking people not to return books on the cart. Normally they might return them as they come in, but we want everything on the outside so that they can be quarantined all at once. The front door, of course, no library service, but please call for service so they can help people. Here's the meeting room. All of our meeting rooms look this way right now. For those of you who come in person, Northside next week, you'll see that Northside's looks the same way. So the green staff have repurposed this area from all the furniture that people can't use, also to workspace. There are 2 workspaces in here with computers, phones. So the person in the back can actually answer the phone while the people out front are helping the appointment service. Here's the other one. They make heavy use of our chat function within our email system to tell each other, like, here's somebody's coming in at this time, you know, I've put it in the document, things like that. This booth is closed for seating during tier 3. Lots of sad signs like that. Here's a happy sign. So most health organizations are saying that if you can get a flow of air from the outside coming into your building, it's one of the best things you can do to keep the air from being dangerous. So green is able to open some windows, which is not the case at most of our libraries. They really enjoyed that. Here we are in Louisa, same story. You can see the beautiful windows there open. They have a few tables out for the public that are, those are about 10 feet wide, but there's enough that for during appointment service, people would have an individual table. Here's their book drop. Books come in through the outside there, and they've moved a cart right over here to handle them and put them promptly into quarantine. Here's the quarantine items. They're behind caution tape. So unfortunately, the mine, which is a big hit out there, is a little bit right now behind caution tape. Here's Louise's meeting room, again, full of furniture, quite heavy furniture that the county generously moved for Ophelia. Here's their staff room, also full of furniture. Here's Ophelia showing that they have basically 2 separate services happening out of the front door here. Those tables actually extend all the way through to the front of the library. So they can do appointment service through one door, letting people in. They have to go through a checklist, confirm good health, things like that, verify that they're wearing a mask. The other side is for curbside pickup, so they can offer those simultaneously. Services by appointment only. Here's Nelson's curbside pickup, which is across the, currently it's across the parking lot, the front entry to the parking lot from the library itself. Here's your first view, well, almost. The way that Susan and her staff are handling it is asking people to remain in the car. Susan comes out and lifts up a sign that basically says one group at a time can come in now, and she goes through the appointment process with them. Julita Ellis moving a very heavy hand sanitizer unit to go back towards the new computer lab. I don't know if this gives you a sense of the scale of the inside of the library, but where Julita is standing is basically the end of the original library, and where I was taking the picture was the other end, and see how far back it goes. Here's Susan shelving. You see some patrons in the background. The biggest thing there is that they're having to tell everybody where everything is, because it's a brand new library space for everybody who comes in. Well, where are the mysteries? Where are the new books? Where are my holds? Things like that. Beautiful new furniture, again, not available currently. I just really like these maps of Nelson County that Susan put up all throughout the computer lab in there. They're US Geographical Survey maps, so that's just, I thought it was neat. I also like the little emoji with the face mask on it. What a year 2020 has been. Okay, and those were my only pictures there. So I just a few things to note there anecdotally. I was very happy with how the remote desktop software that Josh and the IT staff set up was working, especially at Green, where the staff were able to help somebody who desperately needed to use the computer from afar. Basically, they were yelling across the room, and it was very smooth, and largely because Ginny and her staff had practiced, within the workforce there for quite a while. Nelson is seeing entire families book a slot, which would have been a dream to me as a child. It's just a library for your own family for 5 people coming in there. The first week was a big success. As I said, anecdotally, staff were reporting feeling safe. We're going to evaluate capacity in the weeks to come and then start talking about what we can do to provide more service. Any questions about how that first week went or what the plans are moving forward?
I actually walked into the library for this meeting today as a family was coming in, 3 children, 2 parents, all of them with big smiles I've ever seen. And they headed for the children's section and then for the adult section. So it was exciting for them.
Okay, that's all I have.
Thank you, David. All right, the last of the old business is a vote on the JMRL policy 1.4, Friends of the Library, that we discussed at the last meeting. Mike, do you have any comments about this? It's in your packet. The revised sections are in red. Does anyone have any comments about it at this point? May I have a motion then that we accept this policy revision?
So moved.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to go person by person in the way you're on my display, so it won't be any kind of order. Carla?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Kathy?
Yes.
Wendy? That was a yes? You're muted. Lisa?
Yes, yes,
Yes.
yes.
Thank you. Thomas?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Erica?
Yes.
Thank you very much. We'll have a lot more policies to deal with as we get on into the year, but I know Mike's been working on that. There'll be a big policy committee meeting before the October meeting. So all of the board members are obviously welcome to sit in on these meetings so that we get some background on what's being discussed, if that's of any interest. Library director's report, David.
Okay, thank you. One thing I neglected to mention in the tier 3 work is that there is another hours change coming up that didn't make the last list of hours changes that I sent out to everybody. So not only were Green, Louisa, and Nelson moving to tier 3, but Crozet and Northside were adding additional hours. The Central Library is going to be adding Sunday hours starting this weekend. So now we will have service for 7 days a week in JMRL. So it'll be the normal 1 to 5 schedule. It's curbside only still, but Sunday hours will be available. So I'm very glad that the staff here have worked on that plan. Just to make you aware that 2 of the biggest vendors of our digital collection are merging. Overdrive has bought RB Digital. So I don't know that you would hear about this, but you might hear the folks that use the RB Digital app. It's now going to all move to the Libby app, which is the Overdrive service. So in some ways that's good. It'll be a streamlining. There'll just be one thing there. RB Digital was mostly audio book material, some also ebooks, but then also they are the platform for Zinio, the magazine reader. That's a little bit delayed. That's going to be behind the initial surge there. It was mentioned earlier today, the JMRL Staff In-Service Day is going to be all virtual on October 12th. The agenda is coming out this week. I will send it to you all as well. We're having a test session a week in advance for staff so that they can test their own material, their own login capabilities at home with their own devices and things like that. Also making those available in library for staff that need it. The last thing is that earlier in the spring, we talked about a McIntyre Group workroom to talk about a McIntyre Room work group rather. To talk about the naming of the McIntyre Room at the Central Library. This group met last week And the long and short was they agreed to name the room at Central the Swanson Case Courtroom in honor of the historic event admitting the first African-American to the University of Virginia. It was argued by Thurgood Marshall, Oliver Hill, and Spotswood Robinson. Case was the underpinning of Brown versus the board arguments. So I want to thank Carla and Kathy for participating in discussions from the board, and the Charlottesville native and library patron Maya Anderson for participating from the public, Siri Russell from the Albemarle County Office of Equity and Inclusion, and to the staff, Krista Farrell, the manager of Central, Abby Cox is a representative of the Equity Committee, and Josh Howard, who was strong-armed to join because of his doctorate in public history. So the group reviewed the history of the library system, the room, and the court case. We'll be seeking online feedback on that for a month, and then we'll review and make any changes necessary. Suggestions also included down the road seeking a state marker for the exterior of the building to commemorate the Swanson court case. And also, this came from Myra, a display on the third floor of Central giving a timeline and history of library service in the community, which couldn't be more timely because next year it's 100 years of service. So this would be a chance to reflect and tell the story of the McIntyre gift of the McIntyre building, and then to talk about the segregationist history that Lisa was referring to earlier of the organization, and then the move to become a regional library system in the in the 70s. So that was a great idea that came to light there, and staff will begin working on that right away. That's all I have to report.
Great idea.
Came from Myra Anderson.
Is there any feedback or progress on the film that is underway for the commemoration of the 100th anniversary?
Lorenzo has taken some footage both at the Louisa and Scottsdale libraries and is working his way around to the rest of the libraries in order to get footage and to find folks to talk to about this. So I wouldn't be surprised if in the months to come you're contacted by Lorenzo to try and get you maybe via Zoom on footage with some looking for sound bites for the film.
Okay, great. I think we'll all look forward to that.
Absolutely.
Are there any other matters that any board members would like to raise at this point?
Marcy, did you want to remind everybody that next Monday at 3 o'clock, there's a special session called?
Yes, that's written on my agenda, David.
Yes, sorry.
Next Monday at 3 o'clock. There will be a meeting. We will not be doing it by Zoom because of privacy concerns about that platform. And I hope that any of you who feel comfortable in a socially distanced, masked environment will come and actually meet in person to try to facilitate this discussion, make it as efficient and as useful to David as possible. Anyone who feels uncomfortable with coming in to meet with us in the Northside Library can call in by phone. There will be a setup and David will send out details in the course of the week. Good.
Right.
Future
Great.
agenda items, David?
I'm sorry.
Future agenda items.
As you mentioned, a report from the Personnel Committee from Carla next month, and a report on the Policy Committee from Mike.
Good. Is there any possibility of restarting the continuing education? Are there any topics that you think would be useful, particularly going into the rest of this year?
Sure. I mean, we had a slew of ideas basically that were to be reported on, and I think that we've got a few that you might be interested in that are based on JMRL's response to COVID, like how did we adapt summer reading, how are we doing programming, things like that. So yes, certainly if the board is interested in restarting just every monthly continuing ed, staff can provide that.
I think it would be something that would be useful. And I know every single year when we do the board self-evaluation, there is concern by one or more board members about really understanding the underpinnings of how the budget is worked out each year. Since we're in budget season, it might be something that would be worthwhile sort of reviewing before we get into the nitty-gritty of that in November.
Okay. So is that a request for a CE about staff budget construction, basically?
I think it would be very useful.
Okay, great.
Does anyone else have any issues that they would like to bring onto the agenda for the next meeting? Good. Well, thank you all for this meeting. And I would propose that we adjourn at this point, unless there's any objection. All in favor?
Aye.
Excellent. Thank you all. And please don't forget to send me your preferred method of communication.